Good morning, everybody. This is Mrs. Lamert with your guidance lesson for this week. Hey, I hope you had some time over the last week to practice that core breathing that we talked about last week. Hopefully you've been annoyed, or you've been angry, or you've been super duper excited, or just disappointed at some point over the last week so that you could practice that deep breathing. If you remember, I used a tool last week to show us that when we breathe in through our nose, our bellies should be getting bigger. Belly breathing. We should hold it for just a few seconds and then slowly release that air from our chest and bellies. Okay, so if you haven't practiced that, I truly want you to work on that because it's something that can help regulate our emotions really well. And research backs us up saying that it does that as well. Okay. Today our focus is on mindful listening and mindful seeing. You might be thinking, mindful, that means in the moment. It does, okay? Mindful means in the moment to listening to what's around us. So many times our ears are on alert for cell phones, dinging, ringing, binging, whatever they do, okay? Our minds are on alert for somebody knocking at the door or a doorbell if we're expecting someone. But we also want to know, mindful listening helps us choose which sounds to focus our attention on and helps us to be thoughtful in a way we hear and respond to the words of others. So if we're listening, sometimes an adult may have said, repeat back to me what I just said. The reason we do that is because if you can repeat verbatim, word for word, what we have said, that lets us know that, yes, you are practicing your listening, mindful listening. Okay, so we want to do that. And mindful listening is kind of the groundwork for any social awareness and effective communication that we have with others. Being able to listen in this focused way helps us to state what others are thinking, feeling, whether we're in the home and we're listening to our parents and their tone and their inflections, which I know you've learned from music class, or it just gives us a clearer notion of how urgent something is, or how quickly we need to react and respond to something that we're being asked to do, told to do, shouted at, that sort of thing. It helps prepare you for following directions in school and resolving conflicts through discussions, with building relationships, and listening critically to news or ads and other media messages. So that mindful listening tells us, in a way, how to respond. Okay. So I'm going to play the part of a conductor, and this is just an auditory exercise that I think you'll be able to relate to. Our volume control within our voices. A lot of times in your classrooms as younger students, you have 0, 1, 2, 3 as far as volume controls, okay? Whereas 0 is absolutely silent, 1 is light speaking volume-wise, 2 is a little bit louder, like inside your home or inside your classroom, and 3 is that outdoor screaming, playing, loud sound that comes from us, okay? So you have a different range of volumes that you use at different scenarios, okay? Independent work time, lab time, library time. We know that that's when we use our softer voice if we need to use a voice at all. Versus group work time, we're talking in a regular tone. Versus stage performance, when we have to really use our teacher voice or our stage performance voice, and you have to really speak it out and make an effort to get that volume out. Okay, so that's also mindful learning or listening, when we can recognize what voice volume we should be using. Okay. So many sounds around us we are familiar with and we know how to respond to. Usually we aren't mindful of every sound because they're very familiar to us and the brain helps us to focus our attention on screening out those sounds. And just paying attention to those important ones that may pop up occasionally, okay? So I want you to close your eyes and sit comfortably at your table, desk, floor, wherever you might be, okay? And I'm going to kind of just turn my computer screen and make some noises. And I want you to think about what could those noises be, okay? So I want you to listen as mindfully as you can to the sound I make and focus on that sound. If you know what it is, keep it to yourself and record it on a piece of paper, and we're going to play this mystery sound game, okay? So I'm going to turn you away for a short time. You can stare at my breathing ball. How's that? All right. One at a time, I'm going to make a sound. So I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to focus on the sound that you hear. If you think you know what that was, go ahead and record that real quick. And close your eyes and sit comfortably. And try to determine what this sound might be. If you think you know, go ahead and write it down. Let's try a third one. Go ahead and close your eyes. Write that sound down if you think you know what that is. And here's the fourth sound. If you think you know what that is, go ahead and write that down. And our final sound today okay? So if you think about all those sounds and you're listening mindfully, you may have come up with the first sound was me just tapping a pencil on the table. Something you're familiar with from being at school, right? The second sound was this piece of paper being crumbled. Again, a sound you're familiar with, so you may have chosen that one. Third one could be something shaking in a container. Okay, I could take general. I took my dog treats and I just shook the treats. So any kind of miscellaneous items in a can or jar. My fourth one was shuffling a deck of cards. Okay, let's see if you can hear that sound again. Okay. So I was shuffling that deck of cards. And then the final one was just simply tearing of newspaper. That's what that was, okay, or tearing of paper. So again, if we're listening mindfully, these sounds might be familiar to us, or we might have been able to positively identify those. I bet you got a couple of them, okay? Maybe you haven't heard them for a few weeks, but you've gotten a couple of them, I bet. So by concentrating on those specific sounds, we can actually train our brains to listen very carefully. That strengthens that pathway to our prefrontal cortex so that we're able to listen more closely and interpret that, respond to that better. You're in more control of your own thoughts and the processes if you are more aware of the constant sensory input that your brain experiences. So that means anything going in, our ears, our nose, our mouth, our eyes, that's that sensory input. And once our brain can recognize that, we're better off. Okay? When we really listen well, we can get the information we need without being distracted. Then you can decide how to best respond. Some of you may be familiar with that telephone game, where you're sitting in a circle or you're standing in a line and you turn around and you whisper in one person's ear a sentence, and they have to whisper it to the next person and the next person and the next person and the next person. This is an example or a game of mindful listening. I want you to get your family around, not right now, but today, tonight, within the next week. And I want you to sit and I want you to play that telephone game and really focus on mindful listening. I did this with some second graders this year, and boy, this one little guy, he couldn't even hear the words from his friend. Whether they were right or wrong didn't matter. He couldn't hear those words. And the reason he couldn't hear those words is because he was so excited and anticipating what was coming his way that his amygdala was that security guard was shutting down. And it was not allowing him to take in that sound. So that's the extreme that I've ever seen. But if you practice at home, it's really good for just practicing that intake, okay? That mindful listening. So good stuff. All right, I will have a question for you on a Google Meet for today's lesson. Next week, we're going to talk about some of the other senses. Mindful listening is just the big one, okay? When we listen to somebody say, "There's a fire over there," we hear the panic in their voice, and we know to run or look and see which way we can run, okay? When we hear something like, "Oh, I love it. I love these kitties," we know that something is calm and maybe they're laying down and we can go pet them. Okay, so there's different sounds and tones and inflections in our voices that interpret some of those social cues for us, okay, and how to respond. That's what I want you to practice this week, okay? Continue to practice that deep breathing, that belly breathing that we called it, okay? And then now add this mindful listening. And again, play telephone this week with your family members, even if it's at the dinner table. Play some telephone and see how well everybody is listening. All right? Have a good day. We'll see you next week.